Another shelf-stable meal in a bag to add to your emergency pantry. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back everyone. Today I'm making another shelf-stable emergency meal kit, aka meal in a bag. The meal I'm doing today is a meal that my whole family loves. It's called Taco Twist. I mean, who doesn't love anything taco? It's just one of those flavors you can do up so many different ways, and guaranteed my family is going to love it. That's why I buy my taco seasoning in bulk. The Taco Twist is a pasta dish. It's kind of like a homemade hamburger helper, but because it's homemade, it's so much better. This is a meal that we often take camping, and last year I made one change to the original recipe to make it completely shelf stable. That's great for camping because it doesn't take up valuable cooler space, and I can get it packed up and ready to go a couple weeks ahead of time. So I was thinking about it and I realized that this also made it perfect for one of my emergency meals in a bag. We love to have these meals on hand, ready to go in times of emergency, power outages, things like that. During these events, things may be crazy and stressful, so having meals that don't require much thinking will be a huge blessing. Another thing these meals don't require is water, because we include any needed water right in the bag in case clean water is scarce and we need to conserve it. So that's the basic idea with the meals in a bag. Everything you need to prepare the meal is shelf stable and stored all together in one bag along with the cooking instructions. Much less stress for you. But while we love having a shelf full of these in case of emergencies, we also use them for everyday meals. If we've had a busy day, we don't have a plan for dinner, it helps keep us out of the drive-thru or the pizza takeout, and it really saves us money in the long run. Even one of our kids can fix up one of these simple meals. The ingredients for this meal are going to include some rotini pasta, some ground beef, 2 packets of taco seasoning, a can of diced tomatoes, a can of whole kernel corn, and a couple of bottles of water. So you can see it's a pretty simple recipe, but it makes a very tasty meal. Now I'll show you how I put the bag together, and then I'll show you how I prepare the complete meal. So the first ingredient that's going to go in the bag is going to be some rotini pasta. And this calls for 10 ounces of rotini pasta. I did have someone ask me how I store my pasta. I use these containers right here for most of the pastas that I use, the most frequently and the most amount of. These hold, I think, 46 cups, and I'm able to fit 7 to 8 1-pound boxes into each one of these containers, and I just keep them up on my fridge, and we use it out of there. I get these right at Walmart. But we're going to use 10 ounces of rotini. I am going to use my old faithful kitchen scale to measure the 10 ounces. But if you don't have a kitchen scale, I can tell you that it comes out to be about 3.5 cups. Maybe a tiny bit more, but it's less than 4 cups. Now, when I make this up to go camping, I'm only making it for a few weeks ahead. So I use Ziploc bags to contain the freeze-dried hamburg and the pasta. If you were just going to be putting these on the shelf and you knew you were going to use them within a few months, you could use a Ziploc bag or a vacuum seal bag. But if you wanted to put them away for longer term storage, you'd probably want to use a Mylar bag. A quart-size Mylar bag would work perfectly. I'll put a link down in the description box to where we get our Mylar bags. And if you're going to be storing it just for a year or so, I don't think you'd even need an oxygen absorber, but every single ingredient in this recipe is a pretty long-term storage ingredient if they're packaged properly. Freeze-dried meats can last for 25 years packaged properly. The pasta can last a very long time. The canned goods are pretty much good indefinitely. So this is a meal that if you packaged everything up properly, you actually could have these on your shelf for several years or longer. So if I'm putting these away, I would typically use a Mylar bag for my hamburg and my pasta. But tonight I'm going to be cooking this up for you, so I'm just going to use a regular Ziploc. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out the 10 ounces of rotini pasta. There, so I would say that that is 10 ounces. I'm going to go ahead and just use a canning funnel to help me get this into my plastic bag. The other thing that you could use is you could use mason jars to store these, and that would be a pretty long-term storage, especially if you vacuum sealed them or used an oxygen absorber. But I tend to try to avoid glass jars in these meals. All right, so the pasta is all bagged up. Go ahead and seal that up and set it aside. And then I'm going to go ahead and get 2 cups of this freeze-dried hamburger. That is going to be equivalent to about a pound of meat, which is what the recipe calls for. Once ahead, I'm going to go ahead and seal this up and set it aside. So other than that, everything else is just ready to go as is. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I load this up into the bag. The bags that I like to use these bags. I used to put these together in gallon and 2-gallon Ziploc bags. I prefer to use these now that I get off of Amazon. They do have a square bottom and it has a little bit of a paperboard support in there. I have 2 different sizes of these. So depending on how many ingredients my meal has and how much room it takes up will determine which size of bag that I use. I will have links for both of these down in the description box as usual. I like to label these on both sides. This is a self-adhesive CD sleeve. And the paper that I put in here just has the name of the dish on one side and the ingredients and instructions on the other. And then I also like to label the end with the name so that I can set them all on the shelf this way and be able to easily read what each bag contains. All right, so let's go ahead and get this bag loaded up. I'm going to first put in the canned ingredients. I've got the can of diced tomatoes. I'm using petite diced. I like this because the chunks are smaller so my kids don't notice them or pick them out as much. But you could use regular diced tomatoes as well. Then we've got the can of plain whole kernel corn. Next, I'm going to put in the water. This calls for 4 cups of water, so I'm using 2 of these bottles. Next, we'll put in the pasta and the ground beef. And then I'm just going to tuck in our 2 packets of taco seasoning. Now, I do typically buy my taco seasoning in these bulk containers, but for things like this, for meals in a bag and other things where I just need to have a certain amount, I buy packets. It's easier than measuring out the bulk seasoning and having to package it up. There it is, all ready to go. So when we make this on a camping trip, we always make it in our Dutch oven and we use charcoal coals. But this can be easily made in a pot on a stove just as well. So tonight I'm going to use my Coleman butane burner to make this for you inside. This is what we keep on hand for indoor cooking during emergencies. We don't use this camping. We have propane, camp stoves that we use for camping. But this is what I feel safer using inside. And this is a very inexpensive stove and it works great. Now, I like to use the stove when I'm cooking for you guys because my stove is up against the wall and it's hard to get a good angle. So this way I can face you, but it has the added benefit that I'm using the stove, so I know that it works. I know how it works. I'm comfortable using it. I know how much fuel I tend to go through cooking. It's really good to be able to test out your emergency equipment, and so you should do that regardless. Now, this uses this butane fuel, a canister of butane fuel, and you just click it into place with this little lever. And I'm going to turn it around now so that I can operate this. So I'm just going to use a pot with a lid. And we're going to just empty all of our ingredients into the pot. So I'm going to start with the pasta. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the hamburger. And then I'm going to add the other ingredients. Now I am actually going to measure the water for this recipe. It's supposed to have 4 cups of liquid. And I don't want to get too much because, these are 16.9 ounces, I think. So they're going to be just over the amount that we need probably. And I don't want to have too much water because I don't want it to be soupy. And I don't want the pasta to get overcooked if I have to cook out extra water. But what I am going to do is I'm going to use some of the liquid from the corn because if you were in an emergency situation for our emergency cooking, we like to make use of all of the liquid from our canned foods, meats, vegetables, fruits. They all contain water. And that's a valuable resource. So I'm just going to open this can a little bit. Woo! And I'm just going to drain out the liquid into my measuring cup. And we will include this in the liquid that we're using in our recipe. Now I'll open this the rest of the way and just add it to the pot. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up our diced tomatoes and add them in. Now, I happened to use all cans that have an easy open top, which comes really in handy for something like this. But if you don't have the easy open top, you want to make sure you have a can opener. I've sometimes put the little military can openers right into the bag with this just in case, but we always have several manual can openers in our home, and we have one in our emergency cooking kit as well that we have ready to take out if we need it in emergencies for cooking. So I'm going to add this whole can of tomatoes in. We're not going to drain that. Then we're going to add in our 2 packets of taco seasoning. And this is the only seasoning that we need in here, which is really awesome. So now I'm going to go ahead and add the liquid, which is going to be 4 cups. And I'm going to measure it in my measuring cup, but what I usually do is use some water to rinse out my tomato can as well, to make sure that we get every last bit of tomato flavor in our recipe. So now I'll just go ahead and fill this up to the 4-cup line. So there we've got 4 cups of liquid. That does include some of the corn and tomato liquid. And I'm glad that I measured that liquid because that's how much water I have left. That's probably almost a cup of water that would have been extra. But now we have this. If this were an emergency situation, this could be some drinking water for someone. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give this a stir and get this on the heat. The pasta is all nestled down into the liquid. I'm just going to bring this up to a boil, and then I'm going to turn it down and let it simmer. I'm going to get my cover ready so that once this comes to a boil, I can get the lid on it. And if we should happen to need any of this extra water, if I'm getting this is getting close to being done and it seems like it's dry or it seems like it doesn't have enough liquid for the pasta to cook, then I'll be able to add some of this extra water. But I've made this plenty of times and I've never had an issue with that, so I don't think it will be an issue tonight. So I did add a lid to this just to let it heat up a little bit faster and to keep all the liquid in while it's heating. All right, so this has come up to a simmer, so I'm just going to turn the heat way down and I'm going to cover it and just stir it occasionally until it's completely cooked and all the moisture is absorbed. But I'm definitely going to keep the heat low because this typically cooks low and slow in the Dutch oven over the coals. Now you can see I have this turned down about as low as the stove can go, and it's still at a pretty decent simmer, so this stove is a pretty powerful stove. All right, so now it has been maybe about 10 minutes. It's been 10 minutes since it came up to a simmer, maybe about 15 minutes all told from the very beginning. And you can see that this is looking about done. Most of the liquid has been absorbed. And not only is the liquid going to absorb into the pasta and into the freeze-dried ground beef, but some of the starch from the pasta is going to thicken that liquid as well to make it nice and saucy. So at this point, I am just going to give it a little taste test. We are testing for the pasta and the hamburger to make sure that they've both softened up to the texture that we want them to be. And they are both just perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. He's having fun out there. Go ahead and turn this off. We'll just let this sit for a few minutes so that it can cool down and thicken up the last little bit, and it's going to be ready to serve. And this makes a nice big pot of food. This definitely makes more than a hamburger helper would make. All right, so I just let this set off the heat with the heat off for just, 5 minutes or so. And this is completely thickened up and ready to serve. It looks delicious. It smells amazing. Now, one thing I love about this dish is that this is something that every single member of my family enjoys and will eat, and that's actually a rare thing. A couple of our kids are kind of picky. Sometimes people like to have it with a little sour cream on top because my family just loves sour cream, but most often we just eat it just like this. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this latest addition to our repertoire of emergency meals in a bag. These are really great for emergency preparedness. You know, if you pick, say, 7 meals like this that you enjoy and repeat that 4 times, you're going to have basically a month's worth of easy dinners that are shelf stable and ready when you need them. This one is a huge hit with my family, like I mentioned, and I hope that your family likes it as well. Don't forget to check the description box down below for all the links that I mentioned that I would have for you guys. And while you're down there, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you like this kind of shelf-stable meals, because we'll have a lot more coming up. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a taco emoji down in the comments. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.